I remember being in my early 20s, making mistakes with money, buying things I didn't need, and realizing later how much those small decisions actually cost me. In this video, I'm going to share the most important money lessons I learned in my 20s that completely changed my financial future. Lessons that if you apply now, will pay off for the rest of your life. Most people in their 20s underestimate just how powerful time really is when it comes to building wealth. The problem is that when you're young, you feel like you have your entire life ahead of you, so saving and investing feels like something that can wait until you're older. There's always that idea of, I'll start when I make more money, or I'll save later once I've paid off this or that, and because of that mindset, years slip by without ever really getting started. The truth is, this delay is incredibly costly because the one thing you can never get back is time. Compounding is often called the eighth wonder of the world for a reason. Money has the ability to grow on itself, but the longer you wait to start, the less time you give your money to multiply, and that means you're leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table without even realizing it. The solution is surprisingly simple, but requires a major mindset shift. Instead of waiting until you earn more, the best time to begin is right now, no matter how small the amount might be. Even if you can only put aside 50D or 100s a month, the key is consistency and time in the market. Compounding works like this. When you invest money, it earns returns, and those returns then earn their own returns. It's growth on top of growth. And over long periods, the results become exponential. To put it in perspective, let's say you start at 20 years old and invest $200 a month with an average 8% return. By the time you're 60, that account could grow to well over $500,000. But if you wait until you're 30 to start the exact same habit, you'll end up with less than half of that. Those 10 years don't just cost you the $24,000 you didn't invest. They cost you the hundreds of thousands in growth you could have had. That's the real price of waiting, and it's invisible until it's too late. To give you an example from real life, I remember one of my closest friends in college who always told me he'd start investing after graduation once he had a better paying job. He thought it didn't make sense to save when he was already struggling to cover expenses. On the other hand, forced myself to automate small contributions into a brokerage account, even when it meant cutting back on things like eating out or upgrading my phone. At the time, it didn't feel like much, just a few $100s here and there, but 10 years later, the difference was massive. My account had grown steadily, not just from the money I put in, but from the growth building on itself year after year. Meanwhile, when my friend finally started, he was playing catch up. Even though he was putting in more money every month than I was at that point, he couldn't make up for the lost time. The gap just kept getting wider, and that's the painful part most people don't realize until they're already behind. This is why the most important money lesson you can learn in your 20s is that compounding rewards those who start early. It's not about being perfect. It's not about investing huge amounts right away. It's simply about getting into the habit and letting time do the heavy lifting. Your 20s give you a unique advantage you will never have again, and the earlier you start, the more effortless wealth building becomes later on in life. One of the biggest financial traps people in their 20s fall into is lifestyle creep. The problem comes when you finally start making a little money, and instead of saving or investing it, you instantly raise your spending to match your income. You get a raise, and suddenly that extra cash goes toward a nicer car, better clothes, more frequent nights out, or even moving into an apartment that's just slightly above what you can comfortably afford. It feels like progress because your lifestyle looks better on the outside, but in reality, your bank account never grows. The danger is that you create a cycle where no matter how much you earn, you're always spending at the same level, and financial freedom gets pushed further and further away. What makes it worse is that this feels normal in your 20s because your peers are doing the same thing, and social media reinforces the idea that you should reward yourself for every step forward. But the truth is, living paycheck to paycheck, even with a higher income, is just a more expensive version of being broke. The solution is to reverse the script and commit to living below your means, even when it feels uncomfortable. That doesn't mean depriving yourself of everything, but it does mean being intentional with how you spend. One of the best strategies is to create a lifestyle cap, a rule that no matter how much your income goes up, your expenses will only rise minimally. For example, if you get a 500 raise, instead of spending that entire increase on lifestyle, you might only allow yourself to use 100 of it and put the rest directly into savings or investments. By doing this consistently, your savings rate grows while your quality of life still improves over time, just at a sustainable pace. Another way to apply this is through automation. Set up automatic transfers into a savings or brokerage account right after payday, so you never even see that money as available for spending. When your investments and savings are treated as non-negotiable expenses, your brain learns to adjust and live comfortably on what's left, and over the years, this discipline compounds into financial security. An example of this comes from a mistake I made early on. When I got my first real paycheck, I immediately started spending as if I had already made it. I upgraded my wardrobe, ate out almost every day, and financed a car I didn't truly need. Within a few months, even though my income had doubled from what I earned in college, I felt just as broke as before. It was frustrating because I thought more money would solve everything, but it only made my bad habits bigger. I eventually realized that I needed to reset and cut back. I downsized my expenses, sold the car for a cheaper one, and forced myself to live like I was still earning less. At first, it felt like a step backward, but over time, the savings I built started to grow. That decision gave me flexibility when unexpected expenses came up, and later on, it allowed me to start investing earlier than most of my peers. The funny part is, years later, I don't miss the stuff I cut out at all. What I value more is the peace of mind that comes from knowing I'm not tied to my next paycheck or my current job just to survive. The lesson here is that living below your means in your 20s sets the foundation for freedom in your 30s and beyond. It's about trading short-term appearances for long-term stability, about choosing financial independence over impressing others. The earlier you can embrace this discipline, the faster you can build wealth, and the less stress you'll feel when life inevitably throws challenges your way. Debt is one of the most common reasons why people in their 20s struggle to get ahead financially, and the problem is that it often feels normal to carry it. Credit cards, car loans, and student loans are marketed as tools that help you live a better life, but in reality, they can trap you in a cycle that's very difficult to escape. Credit card companies make it easy to swipe now and worry later, and before you know it, a few small purchases snowball into thousands of dollars in balances. Student loans, while often seen as an investment, can create years of payments that eat into your ability to save or invest. Car loans can be even more damaging because vehicles lose value the moment you drive them off the lot, yet the debt stays with you. The real danger is the interest. High-interest credit cards in particular can cost you hundreds or even thousands of dollars every year just for the privilege of borrowing money you didn't really need to spend in the first place. And when you're in your 20s, every dollar going toward interest is a dollar not going toward building your future. The solution is to make eliminating and avoiding debt a priority before it gets out of control. One of the most effective methods is to create a debt repayment plan where you either tackle the smallest balances first for quick wins, the snowball method, or the highest interest rates first for maximum savings, the avalanche method. Both approaches work as long as you stay consistent and disciplined. Another important step is to rethink how you use credit in the first place. Instead of swiping a card for things you can't actually afford, treat it only as a convenience tool to build credit and make sure to pay it off in full every month. If you already have balances, consider transferring them to lower interest accounts or consolidating them so you can pay them down faster. For car purchases, focus on buying reliable, used vehicles that don't come with heavy monthly payments. And when it comes to student loans, don't just settle for the minimum payments. Look into refinancing options or dedicate extra cash toward paying them off early to reduce the long-term interest burden. The key is to view debt as an emergency that needs immediate attention, not something that can sit comfortably in the background of your life. An example that stands out to me is a coworker I had in my early 20s. He drove a brand new car that looked great and always had the latest tech gadgets, but he was constantly stressed about money. He had maxed out several credit cards and was paying the minimum balance each month, which barely covered the interest. He admitted that most of his paycheck was gone before he even had the chance to use it because so much of it went toward loan payments. On the outside, he looked like he was doing well, but the reality was that he was stuck in a financial treadmill, working just to cover his debts. On the other hand, I chose a different path. Instead of financing a new car, I bought a used one outright with cash, even though it wasn't flashy. I used a credit card, but only for the rewards and always paid it off in full. By doing that, I avoided the burden of monthly debt payments and was able to direct my money toward investments. Years later, the difference in our financial situations was clear. While he was still catching up on debt, I had built a solid safety net and started compounding my investments. This is why tackling debt early in your 20s is such an important lesson. It's not just about saving money on interest. It's about freeing up your income so you can build wealth instead of servicing past mistakes. Carrying debt keeps you tied to your job, limits your choices, and creates unnecessary stress. Eliminating it as soon as possible gives you flexibility, options, and the ability to take advantage of opportunities when they come your way. Relying on a single source of income is one of the biggest risks you can take in your 20s, yet most people fall into this trap without realizing it. The problem is that when you depend entirely on your job to cover all your expenses, your financial future is tied to something you don't completely control. Companies downsize, markets shift, and unexpected circumstances can put you in a position where your paycheck stops overnight. Even if you keep your job, a single stream of income limits how fast you can grow financially because no matter how hard you work, your salary often grows slowly and usually at the pace someone else decides for you. Many young people think that once they land a decent paying job, they're set, but in reality, depending on only one income is like standing on a single leg. Any small push can knock you down, leaving you scrambling to survive. The solution is to start building multiple streams of income as early as possible. This doesn't mean you need to launch $1 million business right away, But it does mean looking for opportunities outside of your main job that can generate cash flow or grow your wealth. Side hustles are a great starting point because they allow you to leverage your skills, passions, or even free time to earn extra money. Freelancing, online businesses, tutoring, or even gig economy jobs can all help you diversify where your money comes from. Another powerful option is passive income, investments that continue to generate returns without requiring constant effort. For example, dividend stocks, real estate rental income, or even creating digital products like courses or ebooks can bring in money long after the work is done. The key is not to think of these as optional, extras, but as essential safety nets. Each additional income stream you create reduces your reliance on one paycheck and accelerates your ability to save, invest, and grow wealth. A good example of this is when I was working my first full-time job. At the time, I thought I was doing well because I finally had a stable paycheck. But I quickly realized that my expenses were eating up most of it. I didn't want to be in a position where I was just barely getting by, so I started looking for ways to earn more on the side. I began freelancing online, doing small projects that fit around my work hours. It didn't make me rich overnight, but even that extra few $100s a month gave me breathing room and allowed me to save more aggressively. Later, I invested part of those savings into index funds, and the growth from those investments added yet another stream of income. Looking back, those small steps made all the difference. The freelancing income gave me flexibility, and the investments gave me long-term growth, both of which kept me from being completely dependent on my salary. Meanwhile, a few of my friends who relied solely on their jobs ended up struggling when layoffs hit their companies, proving just how risky that single-source approach really is. The important lesson is that your 20s are the best time to experiment with building multiple income streams because you have fewer responsibilities and more time to learn. Even if the side hustle or investment doesn't succeed right away, the experience you gain is valuable and the potential upside is enormous. Having more than one way money flows into your life not only reduces your financial risk, but also speeds up your journey to independence. It gives you options, freedom, and the ability to design a life where you're not constantly worried about what happens if your one paycheck disappears in your 20s. It's easy to fall into the trap of spending money on things that make you feel good in the short term, but do little for your long-term growth. The problem is that so many people prioritize buying the latest gadgets, upgrading their cars, or splurging on nights out, thinking these purchases define success. Social media makes this even worse by creating pressure to show off a lifestyle that looks impressive on the surface, but is financially empty underneath. The real issue is that every dollar spent on material things that quickly lose value is a dollar not invested into something that can actually increase your earning potential. When you look back 10 years later, those expensive clothes or tech upgrades won't matter, but the skills you chose not to build and the opportunities you missed will. This is where many people in their 20s get stuck. They spend years working hard, but because they don't invest in themselves, their income plateaus while their expenses keep rising. The solution is to flip your priorities and focus on investing in skills, knowledge, and relationships that pay off for decades. Instead of constantly upgrading your lifestyle, put that money into courses, certifications, or even mentorship that can increase your value in the marketplace. Skills like communication, sales, coding, or even financial literacy are assets that never depreciate and can open doors to higher paying opportunities. Networking is another powerful form of investment because the right relationships often lead to opportunities that money alone can't buy. Books, seminars, and experiences that challenge you to grow may not look flashy on Instagram, but they set you up for a lifetime of better decision, making and earning potential. Even smaller investments like learning how to budget effectively or developing healthy habits can compound in ways that completely change your trajectory. The key is to view every dollar as a potential seed. When planted in yourself, it can grow into opportunities that far outweigh the short-term thrill of a purchase. An example that illustrates this clearly is when I was tempted to buy a brand new phone right after getting a raise. Everyone around me was upgrading, and it felt like I deserved to as well. But instead of spending nearly $1,000 on the latest model, I chose to use that money for an online course in digital marketing. At the time, it didn't seem as exciting as holding a shiny new device, but that course ended up giving me skills that I later used to freelance and create an entirely new income stream. That one decision eventually earned me thousands of dollars, while the phone would have been outdated in just a couple of years. Similarly, I've seen friends who invested in attending industry conferences or hiring coaches, and those connections and insights accelerated their careers far faster than any material purchase ever could. On the flip side, I also know people who constantly spent their money on cars, clothes, and gadgets, only to find themselves frustrated years later that they were stuck in the same financial place with little to show for all their spending. The bigger picture here is that your 20s are the best time to focus on personal growth because you have both the time and the flexibility to experiment and learn. Every skill you acquire, every connection you make, and every bit of knowledge you gain compounds just like money in an investment account. The return might not be immediate, but over time, it multiplies and creates opportunities that completely change your financial path. Choosing to invest in yourself instead of material possessions builds a foundation that not only increases your income, but also gives you confidence and independence in ways money alone cannot. One of the biggest mistakes people in their 20s make with money is focusing too much on short-term gratification instead of long-term wealth. The problem comes from the constant urge to chase quick wins, whether it's trying to time the stock market, jumping on the latest get-rich-quick scheme, or spending impulsively because you feel like you deserve it. This short-term mindset often leads to decisions that feel good in the moment but sabotage your future. For example, pulling money out of investments too early, racking up debt for short-lived pleasures, or constantly switching financial strategies without giving them time to work. The challenge with long-term wealth building is that results are not immediate, and in your 20s, patience is not always easy. Social media reinforces the illusion that everyone else is getting rich overnight, and when you compare yourself, you feel like you're falling behind. That pressure makes you more likely to gamble with your money instead of growing it steadily, and years later you realize how much progress you lost by not staying consistent. The solution is to build the discipline to think long-term and stick with strategies that actually work over time. Instead of chasing quick gains, focus on consistency, patience, and steady growth. That means committing to a budget that prioritizes saving and investing, even when it feels like you're not making huge progress right away. It also means avoiding the temptation to constantly change direction just because something isn't delivering immediate results. Long-term wealth comes from small, repeated actions that compound, like investing in index funds, contributing regularly to retirement accounts, or setting up automatic transfers into savings. It's also about shifting your mindset to value stability over excitement. The people who end up financially free in their 30s, 40s, and beyond are the ones who started early, stayed disciplined, and didn't let distractions pull them off course. By focusing on the bigger picture and remembering that wealth is a marathon, not a sprint, you position yourself to actually achieve the freedom most people only dream about. A clear example of this is when I first started investing. I remember checking my account every single day, and when the market dipped, I panicked and wanted to sell. A friend of mine who had more experience told me to zoom out and think about the long term instead of obsessing over short-term fluctuations. At the time, I didn't fully understand, but I decided to hold on to my investments and keep contributing regularly. Years later, I saw how those small, consistent contributions grew into something substantial, even though the short-term ups and downs sometimes made me doubt myself. On the other hand, I had another friend who constantly jumped from one scheme to the next. One year he was into crypto, the next year it was day trading, then he tried flipping expensive items. Every time something didn't work fast enough, he abandoned it and tried something new. While he was chasing quick wins, I was quietly sticking to my long-term plan, and eventually the difference became clear. He had little to show for all his efforts, while my investments had grown steadily in the background without me needing to constantly reinvent my strategy. This example highlights why patience and consistency are the most underrated money skills you can develop in your 20s. The temptation to get rich quickly will always be there, but resisting it and committing to the long game is what actually builds wealth. Your 20s are the perfect time to start practicing this discipline because the earlier you begin, the more powerful compounding becomes. Even if the progress feels slow at first, the habits you set now will determine where you stand decades from today, and the payoff for sticking to a long-term mindset is financial freedom, stability, and the ability to make choices without money being a constant source of stress. We've gone through 6 powerful money lessons that can completely change your financial future if you start applying them in your 20s. First, we talked about the importance of starting early and letting compounding work for you. Then we covered why living below your means helps you avoid lifestyle creep and actually build wealth. We discussed how dangerous debt traps can hold you back and why eliminating them quickly frees you to move forward. From there, we looked at the importance of creating multiple streams of income so you're never dependent on just one paycheck. We also broke down why investing in your skills, knowledge, and relationships pays off far more than material purchases ever could. And finally, we focused on the power of long-term thinking, why patience, consistency, and discipline always beat short-term gambles. Together, these lessons form a roadmap for lifelong financial success. If you found this valuable, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment sharing the money lesson you're starting with today.